Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Kent City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. This is a remote meeting due to the COVID-19 health and safety requirements by the governor. Welcome to anyone joining us via the Facebook City of Kent page, the YouTube Kent 21 channel, and anyone that is calling into the meeting today. Let's go ahead and get started. Kim, would you please call the roll?
Council President Troutner.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce.
Here, Kim.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Thomas. I see you here. I'm not sure. He's not able to hear. I've also noted that the mayor is in attendance today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kim. Moving on, do we have any changes to the agenda from council or staff?
No changes from staff this afternoon.
All right. So with that said, let's get started with department presentations. We have 4 today, and the first one is an ordinance granting a franchise to Soos Creek Water and Sewer District. So Derek Matheson, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Madam President, and good afternoon, Council. I'm here to present a draft franchise agreement with the Soos Creek Water and Sewer District. But before I get into the details, I thought I'd start with a brief background on water and sewer service in the city of Kent. So the city provides water and sewer service to the central portion of Kent, while water sewer districts serve the outer portions. And you can see the map on your screen. The one on the left is the water service area, on the right is sewer service, and the yellow is the city's service area, and then the other colors are the water sewer districts. Water sewer districts are municipal corporations just like cities, and they have their own elected boards, employees, infrastructure, and rates. The Soos Creek Water and Sewer District serves the Panther Lake area and portions of the East Hill. The Highline Water District and Midway Sewer District serve portions of the West Hill. And then the Lake Meridian Water District, which until recently was known as Water District 111, serves the Lake Meridian area. The city taxes its own water and sewer utilities at 13% for water and 9.5% for sewer. The city has not taxed water sewer districts in the past, and that was largely because case law on our authority to tax them was unclear. So instead, our approach has been to negotiate franchises that provide for franchise fees, or you can think of them as payments in lieu of tax, of 6%. And we chose 6% because that's our standard tax rate on most non-city utilities, such as electricity and natural gas. The franchise fees help resolve an equity issue that's caused by the fact city water and sewer customers pay utility taxes that support general fund services, and they pay it indirectly through their water or sewer rates, while city residents who are water sewer district customers historically have not paid utility taxes. Earlier this year, the Washington State Supreme Court made it clear that cities can tax water sewer districts, but we felt it was important to treat our residents who are served by Soos Creek the same as our residents who are served by other water sewer districts and pursue a franchise fee in the Soos Creek District 2. So the draft franchise before you this afternoon with Soos Creek tracks very closely with our existing franchises with Lake Meridian, Highline, and Midway, which the City Council adopted over the course of 2017 and 2018. The draft provides for a 6% franchise fee in exchange for the city's commitment not to collect utility tax from the district and not to take over the district during the franchise term. We expect to receive about $421,000 a year in franchise fees, which are general fund revenue. And to put this in context, Soos Creek's franchise fees would exceed the other 3 water sewer districts' fees combined. The franchise term is 10 years, plus an automatic extension for 5 years, plus recurring automatic extensions of 1 year each after that, unless or until either party terminates the agreement. I do want to point out there are a few noteworthy differences between this franchise and our franchises with the other 3 water sewer districts. One, Soos Creek's Board of Commissioners was not willing to pay the franchise fee on the portion of sewer revenue attributable to sewage treatment. And the district collects the sewage and then transmits it to King County Metro for treatment. So on the sewer side, we would collect the franchise fee on rate revenue associated with connection, but not treatment. And so because that was a big deal for the district's Board of Commissioners, we agreed to exclude it from the fee calculation with the caveat that if Soos Creek agrees to pay a utility tax or a franchise fee on treatment to any other city, then it triggers a requirement to pay the same to Kent. The second way it's different is that Soos Creek provides streetlight services within its service area, which is a financial benefit to us. And then 3, Soos Creek agrees to allow the city to provide sewer service to the city's Kent East Hill Operations Center property, even though that property lies within the district's exclusive sewer service area. So that's a further benefit to the city. Franchises are a little bit different than other council actions because state law requires them to make 2 trips to the city council, 1 trip for introduction and 1 for adoption. So if the committee supports it, we would include the franchise on the January 19th and February 2nd consent calendars. After February 2nd, the ordinance would take effect 5 days after passage and publication, and then Soos Creek will have 30 days to accept the franchise, which we fully expect based on prior meetings of the Board of Commissioners. So to wrap this up, I want to thank a couple of people, our retired Public Works Director, Tim Laporte, our interim director, Chad Beeren, and our assistant city attorney, Christina Shook. We worked on this together over several months, and it's been a long process, but we're really pleased with the outcome. So we recommend approval, and Chad, Christina, and I are here to answer your questions.
Great. Any questions? Councilmember Boyce, you have your microphone off.
Thank you, Madam President. Hey, there, just for clarity here, is I think in the past, I think you was trying to work with Soos Creek for so long to get them to come on board. Is it because the legislator adopted something that kind of brought them to the table?
Well, in the past, the district has argued that it doesn't need a franchise from the city in order to operate in city rights of ways, and that it doesn't need or isn't required to pay utility taxes. Over the last 2 years, 2 Washington State Supreme Court decisions made it clear that cities can require a franchise and cities can collect utility taxes. And so that's what got the negotiations moving forward finally.
And you mentioned the $400,000 that goes to the general fund, which also is going to impact our balance and so on as well, right? In a positive way.
Yes, that's unbudgeted general fund revenue at this point.
Well, thanks to the team. I know you have been talking about this for quite some time, so I'm glad to see we have all of them on board now too, right? So that's a good thing.
Yes, this is the 4th of 4 water sewer districts.
Okay. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Good questions. My question was going to be that it was unbudgeted. So anybody else have any questions for Derek on this? All right. So just want to make sure everyone is okay with moving this forward to the January 19th meeting. All right. And Derek, thank you so much to you and your team. I know you and I have talked about this quite a bit because you've kept me up to speed, but it's been a lot of back and forth and a great outcome. So thank you very much.
It was definitely a give and take, and I think we came to a fair agreement.
Perfect. All right. So moving on in our agenda, we have item number B, which is payment of bills. Everyone should receive that through their email. So we will move that forward to the consent calendar. And then next we have the contract amendment with Summit Food Services for inmate food services at the City of Kent Correctional Facility. This also requires council action.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Diane McCuistion. I'm here tonight to update you on a contract amendment. The contract is with Summit Foods. They're our service provider for inmate meals. Our current contract expired on December 31st, 2020, but allows for continuance of services. The proposed amendment would extend the contract for 3 years. It makes adjustments to the price, emergency food planning, staff meals. It also authorizes Summit to retroactively charge the new rate for work performed in 2021. The previous version of the agreement was approved by Council on December 8th. We had last-minute negotiations. The terms of the agreement were mutually changed. It's now for a shorter duration. It has a larger per meal increase, and it offers discounts for larger population sizes. The contract amendment that you received tonight is the one that we'd like to move forward with. Thank you.
Great. Any questions about this contract? Okay, so I just have one quick question. You said that there were just some changes as far as the contract shorter. There's an increase in the price per meal, but also a possibility of a discount. So does that change the price very much from what we are currently paying?
Over the duration of the contract, it'll change it by 2%.
Okay.
Summit Food had some concerns about food price increases that they were experiencing due to COVID.
Okay. Councilmember Boyce, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Diane, just a general question. I've been reading a lot of news stuff, and I read some stuff where a person went to jail and they are required to have organic food, right? So we feed them what they feed them, right? I mean, there's no special menu where they get to eat. How did that process work for what they get to eat?
It is a nutritionally balanced meal. Part of our services with Summit is they have a nutrition on staff that makes sure that it is a balanced diet that they're receiving. It's 2,600 calories per day that each inmate receives. And then we accommodate any kind of allergies or special diets that are medically required or possibly religiously required. We do accommodate those as well. But not so much organic foods that that I'm aware of.
Roughly, how many people do we have in our jail, roughly, give and take? Do you know?
We're running in the upper 40s. Today was 55, but we've been steady around 42 to 46.
And what is our capacity?
We're running about a 40% capacity. With our programmings, in 2019, our average population was 134.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Diane? All right. So this is a contract amendment with Summit Food Services. Is everyone okay moving this forward to the consent calendar? All right. Not seeing any hands raised, and I'm seeing some thumbs up. So we will move that forward to consent. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, now we move on to item D. This is information only, Transportation Master Plan, Potential Plan Performance Measures. So welcome, April.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me tonight to introduce the system-wide performance measures for the Transportation Master Plan. Next slide, please. So tonight I want to give an overview of the plan performance measures, detail how they're going to be integrated into the long-range and the short-range transportation plans, go over a couple examples of transportation performance measures, discuss some things to consider as Kent develops transportation performance measures, and then detail our next steps. Next slide, please. Plan performance measures are vital for understanding our progress on the 5 adopted TMP goals. Next slide, please. The 5 goals detail the 5 key themes: connectivity and options, safety and health, placemaking, strategy, and stewardship. Next slide, please. The prioritized project list includes 96 projects that will serve bicyclists, pedestrians, vehicles, and some that serve all 3 modes. Each project on the expanded project list was evaluated and scored based on project performance measures. Prioritized projects are the projects that do the most to ensure progress on those 5 adopted goals. Next slide, please. The policies and actions provide direction and guidance to the goals. The actions essentially define the next steps towards achieving our goals. Next slide, please. So the goals outline the vision for transportation in Kent. The prioritized projects and the policies and actions are how Kent is going to make progress towards those goals, and the plan performance measures are how that progress is measured. The process is not linear, it is iterative. The output from the plan performance measures help Kent understand the progress on each goal and the degree of that progress. Fundamentally, performance measures are a snapshot that are used to inform next steps and influence decision-making. Next slide, please. The iterative process performance measures will be detailed in the annual 6-year Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. Next slide. The 6-year Transportation Improvement Program is a short-range transportation planning document. This plan is updated annually in the first 2 quarters. Projects move from the long-range plan to the short-range plan when the project is prioritized and when funding is identified. Next slide, please. In previous years, the TIP has progressed in 3 steps. The first step prioritizes projects and identifies funding sources for these projects. The second step includes updating and completing new project cost estimates, detailing project budgets, and developing the overall TIP budget. Of note, the first 3 years of the TIP must have a reasonable budget, and the last 3 years can be a bit more aspirational. The third step involves developing and updating the TIP document. The stars are typical updates for City Council. For 2021's TIP update, tasks related to plan performance measures will be included in each step. The number of TIP updates needed to incorporate all identified performance measures will largely depend on data availability. Performance measures identified without an existing data source will require multiple years to incorporate into our TIP. Next slide. A series of workshops are planned with an interdepartmental team to develop the proposed performance measures. The first workshop was held at the end of December. Next slide, please. This team has a list of things to consider as the proposed performance measures are being developed. These considerations fall into primarily 3 categories: data, staff, and balance. Data considerations include how often the data is collected, as well as data availability, the data collection process, the cost of data, and funding sources to purchase data if it's needed. Staff capacity is primarily related to the ability and time required to collect and analyze data, as well as the staff time and resources to report on those performance measures as we move forward. Finally, balance relates to developing measures that balance both ambitious and ability to show progress, as well as balancing staff capacity and the number of measures we're reporting on. Next slide, please. I have 3 examples just to go over and give you a variety of the approaches that can be used as we start moving forward on performance measures. Next slide, please. First up is Seattle. As with Kent, Seattle has 5 goals. They have a step between goals that details outcomes, with performance measures grouped by outcome. Of note, Seattle tracks 100 performance measures that are reported in a report that's done biannually. Next slide, please. These are some of the safety performance measures tracked. These are all primarily related to projects and project tracking, so tracking what we're doing on our roadway network. Next slide, please. These are some of the interconnected performance measures tracked. The measures are diverse on this, tracking multiple types of satisfaction, usually related to survey responses, tracking transit ridership, and also tracking different project and planning efforts. Next slide, please. Next is Redmond. Redmond has a much simpler system and a much simpler report out methodology. Redmond tracks 16 performance measures and they're grouped in 8 groups. The measures are detailed on their website and reported annually. Next slide, please. So network completion is one of their major kind of goal areas, and they have 6 measures in this. In this area, they measure vehicle, bicycle, freight, and transit, and 2 for pedestrian. And they consider it system completion, and they use a pretty complicated spreadsheet that determines how fast they're completing their network. Next slide, please. Street preservation is related to maintenance and the condition of arterial streets. Oops, 2 slides forward. That's it. Thank you. The data source is one that must be collected with staff resources or bought. Additionally, this data source is not one that's usually collected annually, but every 2 to 3 years. So that would be a consideration. Next slide. The last example is Bellingham. Their approach is much more technical in terms of data tracking, analysis, and presentation. They have a report with 11 chapters that they do annually where they report different measures. Next slide, please. For example, for mode share, Bellingham presents the progression and the goal for all modes, and they do it in a single table. That's quite complicated to someone not used to looking at this, so not as easy and accessible. Next slide, please. So to give you some next steps as we're moving forward. So this month, we're soliciting feedback from the interdepartmental staff group, and we're also meeting with different departments to understand what data do we currently have on hand, what do some of the processes look like, what would it look like in order for us to start tracking it? Is there something in place, or is it a process we're going to have to develop? Next month, we're going to be meeting with that group again, and we're going to be talking about what we found out. We're going to be talking about the feedback that we received from the different departments to try to get a baseline and understanding what can we accomplish this year. In March, we're going to be looking at what we found out and coming up with what we're going to do this year and setting up what we're going to plan to do next year. What do we already have data and we can already start presenting on? What do we need to get data and we can't really present it until a future year? And then in April, we're going to be focused on how we're going to report this out in the Transportation Improvement Program. One of the big things is making sure this is not something that's overly complicated and also accessible, and making sure that it makes sense and it makes sense to those that are seeing it. So I've included on the next 2 slides kind of some 2 basic examples of what we would call dashboards. So this are data tracking transportation. This is an example that really just says, when you're looking at it, how are we doing? Are we improving? Are we just kind of maintaining? Or are we not improving on different measures? And on this one, a good way you can look is some of the measures, there is no data available for the year. So that is going to be something we're likely going to encounter as we keep going forward. The next slide, please. Oh, there it is. This example is a little bit more technical, but gives you some more background so you understand a little bit more of what you're looking at. So giving you a question of what we're tracking, what our goal is essentially as we're tracking it, and then how we're doing on that goal. So I wanted to give you some examples to kind of set some expectations as we're moving forward of what the staff group is trying to accomplish on both identifying and making sure we are identifying measures that make sense and that we can accomplish, but also making sure that when we present the data that it's usable. And I will gladly take any questions.
Thank you, April. Councilmember Larmer, you had your hand up. Did you have a question about a previous slide?
I did, but actually April answered it in the preceding slide. So just to clarify, so April, these dials, these radial agreed, that's what you're suggesting for our report?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think
okay.
There's a lot of ways we can slice or dice this and do this, but I think one of the important things is that it's accessible and it's not something we bury in a report and we actually use it.
Right.
And this is a format that's been tried and true. It really has worked well in other examples that I followed.
Yeah, I like this. I like this approach very much. Thank you.
Councilmember Boyce. I
think Councilmember Larmer kind of led it to my question and answer, because I'm looking at the Bellingham. I kind of like their chart too, right? I know Councilmember Thomas was giving Mr. Ellis a hard time about recreating the wheel, right? So look like there's several different examples or cities on how they go about collecting data and how they report it. I just wondering if this is something, this particular way you collect it and showing it here, is this based on something that the system we use that output this data, or is it something you guys created, or just I was hoping you can shine some light on that, please.
So this is an example from a MPO, so kind of like the Puget Sound Regional Council. So we've not created anything. Right now, we're at the stage where we're identifying the measures we want. And then once we identify the measures we want, we need to figure out if we have the data or if we need to get the data to understand how long it's going to take us. Admittedly, some of the best measures are ones we're going to have to collect data this year and we won't get to report on. So that's some of the staff group's questions that we're working through now.
Good. All right. Thank you so much.
Right. Anybody else have any questions for April? April, I agree with Councilmember Larmer too. I think this is very easy to read and to understand. I like the idea that you're looking at what other cities in our region are doing so that we can figure out what works best for us based on, you know, looking at what those cities are doing and whether or not we agree with if that's going to be the best approach for us and something that's easy to understand and easy for everyone else to understand. So great. Anybody have any other thoughts on this? All right, April, we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of this agenda. I just want to remind council members that we do have our retreat coming up in February. I know you've got 2 dates marked off on your calendar. After some consensus with my colleagues, we are going to go with the Friday afternoon. We don't really have a time yet. I think some of the suggestions were noon to 5. And I will make sure everyone gets an updated invite to their calendar so that everyone can plan accordingly for that. So, and with that said, we are at the end of the agenda. Have a great evening, everyone. Stay safe and take care. We are adjourned.